The tragedy of slavery cannot be overstated. Taking on one's agency, grim futures anticipated. Liar and a sweet of heart did not comprehend how traumatic her request would be for her new friend.
Slave trade in the Mediterranean was fed through hostages and wars, and due to the need for menial labor in both towns and agricultural settings. As social classes became stratified, those who wished to flaunt their wealth would acquire slaves to help in domestic duties. Slavery had widespread acceptance throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Slave traders would often travel towards conflicts and wars, taking on the captive soldiers, and then they would travel from locale to locale, taking on new slaves, selling those they already had traveling within their unsanitary holds. Aurelia Prolitza, Nuances of Mediterranean Slavery.
Liarana was horrified to see bloody welts on Shania's ankles, caused by the shackles, and no doubt by her attempts to rescue her lady. She was terrified her best, dearest friend in all the world might be mortally injured. She looked away from Shania's bloody ankles, and into the amber-colored eyes of the man who had breathed life into her, just as the breath Shania gave her ran out. He was looking at her as if she was some beautiful lady, rather than smelly, half-drowned and unkempt. Her eyes dropped away from his, looking instead at the laces on his tunic. He had a swirl of dark chest hair, and the sheen of seawater made the fabric cling to his torso. She was uncomfortably aware of her own bedraggled appearance. It was only at this moment that it occurred to her that they were speaking a language that was very similar to the tongues of Cella and Palmyra.
"Where is this?"
she asked, using a dialect as close to what she was hearing as possible, and waited to see if they would understand. A man with pure white hair and dark brown skin turned at her words and came towards her. His eyes were light blue, and she thought him the most extraordinary-looking man she'd ever seen in her life.
"I am Liarana, priestess of Hathor."
It wasn't exactly false. Shania's sister was a servant to one of the priestesses.
"And this is Shania, my loyal servant, and as precious to me as a sister."
At least, that was true.
"Where are we, and what will become of us?"
"Have you not heard of Estolia?"
he asked. The way he spoke the name of the land communicated that it was akin to paradise.
"This land is blessed by deity. Only the worthy may walk her shores."
He gestured to the last of the slave traders who were meeting a most untidy end.
"I am Kedrick."
Her attention returned to Shania.
"My friend and faithful servant is injured."
Kedrick looked at Shania's ankles before assuring her.
"The women of the nearest village wait for word that the unworthy have been vanquished. They have unguents for healing and will serve the needs of the unfortunate among your company."
Liarana tried to contain her fear. When she felt a warm hand on her shoulder, she looked at the man who had saved her, and then back at the white-haired man.
"Liarana, may I present Prince Antiochus, heir apparent to the crown of Estolia."
He gestured to the man looking down at her.
"Antiochus, this is Liarana, priestess of Hathor, and her loyal servant Shania."
He took her hand and looked at her with the most peculiar expression upon his face. She looked down, blushing, but that brought Shania's ankles back into her line of sight. Troubled, she looked up into his eyes.
"My servant,"
she said, gesturing to Shania.
"I worry that she is gravely injured."
The two men had a brief dialogue in their language before Kedrick turned and reassured her that help really was only a few minutes away. Tremaine never understood what the aura could be like. How could a woman glow with the colors of the rainbow? He was indisputably seeing an aura. Her skin was a dark, unblemished brown, almost black, and she was surrounded by a shimmering cloud of darkness that billowed as if some lamp was trying to burst free to shine a bright beacon to all. He was overwhelmed and fascinated at the same time. She was setting the air around her aflame with the burning intensity of her aura. He took a deep gulp of air and turned to his brother. Antiochus was looking at the fair-haired woman with fascination. They would compare their experiences later. He and his brother were both destined to find love at the same time. They would, as their Bendelora foretold, find the women who were right for them and wed them on the same day, 7 days after their mutual birthday. Just then the commotion of reinforcements arriving brought Tremaine's attention from his thoughts. Rialto arrived with several villagers from Pirates' End. He looked at the cargo of humanity they freed. It looked like most of the slaves in the ship were women and girls destined for the pleasure trade. Rialto paused and clasped his hands together, hard enough so that his knuckles turned white. His lips moved slightly. Tremaine suddenly understood. His uncle was thanking deity. He was profoundly moved. Tremaine looked again at the freed slaves, trying to understand what the keeper of the soul of Estolia saw instantly. One woman had gathered several young children around her. She was speaking quietly to Feldram. He was almost a full year older than Tremaine. Feldram's expression resembled Antiochus. With another glance from his uncle to his brother, understanding burst, like the dawning of the sun, into his mind. When he looked at the men and women in and around Graveyard Bay, he saw enough so that he was also flooded with a deep and abiding gratitude. He, too, closed his eyes and clasped his hands together so he could thank deity for always keeping the promises made to Zacharias, and for seeing to the needs of all Estolians. His generation was remarkable for the number of boys born to Estolia. One of the questions he and the other acolytes debated: were they so prolific in bringing forth nearly 2 boys for every 1 girl because their great construction was finally finished? There was enough room within the palace to house twice the population. Was this how deity would help them to fill those empty hallways and wings of the palace? The alternative viewpoint in the debate had always been the fear that some of the rising generation would be forced to live their lives celibate. Rialto, and old Cornelius before him both insisted that deity would never leave even one of the sons of Zacharias without a mate. Their faith would be tested, but the faithful would be rewarded with a woman perfect for them, bringing to each man the comfort of a soul-rich relationship. Deity guided these women to Estolia. To judge by the stunned expressions on the faces of the women, they were as enthralled by the men as the men were with them. Feldram's expression caught his attention again. Events like this one brought pleasure, not only to those whose lives were irrevocably changed for the better, but also to deity. Pleasure in eliminating those who bought and sold people like cattle or sheep, in fulfilling the deepest desire of so many of the children of Zacharias, and in the abiding faith that so many of the men on the shore had, day after day, even in the absence of a sweet daughter of Estolia to keep their souls. Deity always provided. He felt proud to be Estolian when he recognized the deep connection with deity that his people enjoyed. No other nation had what they had.
Once enslaved by men depraved, understanding dawn, she had done this to her friend. Now they both faced untidy ends, shackled in the pirate's hold, amongst the other captive maidens waiting to be chattels sold, goods upon a ship overladen. Ooh.